If you are tired about all the theory in the RUY LOPEZ, you should definitely check this Gambit. I will show you first some tricks that can happen, and then we will check some variations. So e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5, and here with the move f5 we enter in the Schliemann Gambit. Okay, so I think that White can think is well, I will trade, he will take back, and I will gain a pawn. And maybe there are some tricks. So let's say that White takes, we can take back, and if White takes the e5 pawn, we can play Queen d4. And here, half of the time we reach this position. The move that White plays on the chess database is Queen h5 check. And this is a blunder because often in this position, when the f pawn is already been pushed, there is a trick to gain the rook. So White plays this because on g6 he is hoping to sacrifice the knight for the pawn. But what they don't realize is that the queen from d4 is covering also the rook on h8, so we can take back, and well, if White takes the rook, we are up a queen. But even if White doesn't and plays Queen takes g6, we can move the king on d8, and then our plan is to bring our knight on e7 and to develop. So let's say White takes knight e7, Queen g3, and here we take the pawn, we are chasing the queen, and well, if the queen goes away, let's say here, we will develop with tempos, and we are winning, let's say queen b3, because for some reason they don't want to trade the queens. We can play bishop d6, and later on we will put the pressure on these pawns. So maybe I don't know, maybe d3 to bring some pieces in action. We can play rook e8, and well, if bishop e3, we will sacrifice the knight, and we are fine. So let's see other ideas. If they want to trade the queens, we will do it. So queen d3, we will trade the queens, and go for the c2 square. There is a fork. There are only two ways to cover that this square. That are king d1 or knight a3. But if knight a3, we can take the knight and then deliver the fork. And if queen d1, we can play bishop g4 check, because after f3 we will sacrifice the knight and deliver another fork. So this is a trick that happens really a lot of time. Not this one, but the one with knight e5 and queen h5 check. Really a lot of times. So let's check other ideas. Let's say that in this position, White decide to accept the gambit and takes. We will push the pawn, and here the right move is queen e2, but as we can see, the knight can't move on these two square because they are protecting from the knight, and this diagonal is protecting by the queen. So maybe White will take first the knight, just to release a bit of pressure, and hoping that if we take the knight, they will take back with the bishop and they will be up a pawn. But we don't do that. We take with the d pawn, and again, if the knight can't move, so if knight g1, we can simply take back the pawn, and we are develop. Compared to White, we will win this pawn, this game. Maybe let's say White wants to solve some problems with d3. Here they will lose a pawn. So after c takes, we can take with the queen. And if they don't do that, well, they are worse. We can long castle, bring maybe the bishop on c5, try to put pressure on the c2 square. The pro of this variation is that if White doesn't know how to deal with it, we have the f file that is open. So plans like rook f8, rook f7, and the other rook on f8, and also the other plan, and also the same plan, but short castle are really powerful. So let's say that white doesn't. The only way that white has to cover to protect this knight is by pinning our pawn, but we can simply take back the pawn. And if white try to put more pressure on the e4 pawn, this is a really important move. We don't protect this pawn with the f6 knight because with the knight on f6, because then there is a knight on h4 that is really powerful. So first, queen e7. Now we are forcing this knight to move, and this knight can move on the h4. So this knight will move on d4. But after bishop g6 and castle, we can play knight f6 and. Well, here we are winning. They can't play d3 because we will trade. We will trade like this, just to show you. We can trade, and if queen takes, we can take back. And when this happen, we can first long castle, put pressure on the knight, and then we will be able to win the d3 pawn. So let's check other ideas. We saw some traps that can occur in this position. Let's say now that white doesn't take first on c6 because they want to give themselves the possibility to play knight d4, and let's say that they play queen e2. Here we will develop our queen on e7, and well, white takes. Now he is forced. He is forced because if they move back, let's say on g1, they can't move in another place because again these two squares are controlled by these three squares from the queen and this other one from the knight. So if they play knight g1, we can simply play knight d4, doing a fork, and if queen f1, maybe to keep the cover of the bishop, we can deliver a fork. And if queen c4 instead, we can play queen e5, threatening again the bishop, and if the bishop move, we have b5 that wins a piece. So let's see now the other reasonable variations. The other two reasonable variations in this position are knight c3 and d3. That is the most solid one. But even with d3, there is nothing to be worried for black because even if the computer gives 0 0.4 for white, this is practically speaking is really, really hard for white to win this game. So we can take and develop the knight on f6. Now we are threatening this pawn. So if white, let's say, try to defend this pawn with knight c3, we will first pin the knight, and if they castle, we can trade the knight and then play d6, and we will play on this ruin structure. So let's say that just some reasonable moves, just to give you an idea of what is the plan for black. On bishop g5, we can castle. Let's say white is scared of the same pin, so they play h3. We can place our queen on h8, on e8, with the idea of bringing it on g6. So now let's say rook e1, queen g6, maybe queen d3, bishop e6, and here the bishop can't move because the h3 pawn is hanging. So, and if they trade it, we will be fine. They want to maybe they want to bring the rook on the defense of the g2 pawn, but here we are winning. White doesn't really have anything to hoping for, and we will attack. And maybe if white is good and lucky, we'll be able to defend. So let's say that white doesn't defend the pawn on e4. Okay, if white doesn't defend the pawn on e4 and they play, sorry, they play castle, Well, we can't really take this pawn because then there is a queen e2 that is really annoying, and we will lose this pawn, and the knight has to go away now. D5 doesn't work for c4, but also for knight takes c5. So we don't want to take the pawn. First, we will develop our bishop now on c5, and well, if white decided to take, we can take not with this time, not with the d pawn, because they will trade the queen and then win the e5 pawn, but we can trade with the b pawn, and if white takes, we can long castle, and we have a lot of compensation. This pawn is weak. We can later on bring our bishop on a6, just to deflect the rook from the defense of the f2 pawn. So if knight c3, just to give you an idea, bishop a6, rook, and on rook e1, we can even sacrifice, because if king takes, we have knight g4, and after the king goes back, we can regain the piece. White king is exposed, and we are fine here. We are winning, better, not winning, but for sure better. So let's check now the last reply that I want to show you. On this position, white can play also knight c3. So on knight c3, we can take back. And here there are two main replies for black that are d5 and, sorry, d5 and knight f6. So let's check both. On the d5, maybe is the sharpest one. White can take the pawn on e5, threatening the knight. And when we take back, white plays knight takes c6. We don't take back because there is a fork that is hitting the rook, and we play queen g5, threatening the g2 pawn and the bishop. So white protects everything with a discover check, but after c6 and bishop f1 to protect the g2 pawn, we can first play queen g6 just to go away from this annoying pin. And if white wants to activate the pieces, we can first play bishop g5 with the idea of long castling, and after queen g2, queen d2, sorry, we will long castling, and now we are threatening the knight. So if they want to move, we can let's say play rook e8, or but even knight f6 is fine, because if they take back, well, this pawn is pinned, so they can't. If they try to chase our bishop, we will play e3, but also rook e8. Now we are threatening to a discover attack. So if they take, we can take with check. And now, well, if they go here, we will take back, and I think we are able to win the queen here with a small tactic. So nothing to be worried. Let's check now, not d5, but knight f6. Here we can play also knight f6, and I prefer more this one, to be honest, but just because I prefer to have a strong center with the pawns. So here we are threatening the knight, so queen e2 is kind of forced, and now we play d5. And if the knight takes, we can take back with the g pawn, and we have a comfortable position. Here is if white castle, we can pin the knight. And if they try to do something, let's say h3, we will simply bring back our bishop. And even if the computer is suggesting g4 to kick away again the bishop, because we were threatening, well, maybe not right now, e5, e4, but we are threatening to maybe bring our queen on d6, and then play d5, play e4. Even if the computer is suggesting this, I personally don't like it. Here, an important thing is that if we play, let's say, bishop g6, they can take this pawn because the rook is hanging. But we can sacrifice this bishop to expose even more the king. So if white takes, we can play queen d7, preparing the long castle, hitting the h3 pawn, and preparing to play on the g file. So if king h2, we have a discover attack, and if king h1, we can first take the pawn with check, and after knight h2, well, we are fine. We can play rook g8, and this is a game. So I hope you enjoyed the video. If you find it interesting, feel free to leave a like or to subscribe if you want to stay updated. See you in the next video.